All right, welcome into Big Hitters Only. We're recording on Sunday morning, February 2nd, Groundhog Day at 10:05 a.m. Want to shout out our new sponsor, Delta Spirits. Here's the bottle and then the cans. Blueberry lemonade, Paloma. We got a ginger beer one, a ginger mule, and a cherry limeade. These are THC-based drinks. Use code BHO10 at checkout. DrinkDeltaSpirits.com. Already had some sales. Had three or four sales last week. Good stuff. All right, guys. UNC falls to 13-10 overall, 6-5 in the ACC. It was, and this is how I was kind of thinking about it. Like it went exactly as I expected it to go. Domination from start to finish, and the size differential was a huge issue, both on defense and offense for UNC. Everyone watched it. It was a complete beatdown in the first half, signs of life in the second, but it was just, there's no way UNC was to come back from the first half deficit. What was the first half score? It was over 20, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, all right, Mike, what are your initial thoughts on the game? I mean, you had some nasty tweets out there, the emotional tweets. What were your thoughts on the game?
I believe they were nasty. I think what I was feeling is basically what everyone in the Carolina fan base is feeling last night and this morning, which is that this game just seemed devoid of life from the Carolina side from the get-go. We just completely were overmatched. I mean, it's never good when a Duke UNC game isn't remotely competitive. I mean, the game was 7-6 at one point, and then that was the last time this game was even within reach by any stretch of the imagination. 22-point deficit at half, maybe some signs of life in the second half, but I think that's largely just Duke was playing with their food. I mean, that's once they got to the second half, it was very much like a let's just get shots up and go for highlight reel stuff. I think, like you mentioned, a lot of what we have been harping on the entire season and a lot of our feelings and frustrations that we had about this team were completely validated last night.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think this is one of those games where if, and we'll talk about it later, we do choose to move on from Hubert Davis or whatever the future of this program holds, this will be the game that people will look back to as kind of the tipping point. And so there's a lot to address, a lot of individual problems, but like as a whole, this game is pretty much exactly what we thought it would be.
Yeah, you're seeing two programs move in opposite directions. I mean, Duke looks like the cream of the crop, Final Four, like lock, and then one of the best teams in the country with the National Player of the Year, recruiting, top 10 players. And they have 2 or 3 top 10 players from this class, the next class, loaded 5-star rosters, and UNC is struggling to hit on players and 13-10 and almost 500 now in the ACC. Spenser, you were in the building. I saw the fit this morning. I saw your Instagram. I saw your fit. Went through your story. Take us through the scene. I've covered a couple games there, but as a UNC fan in the building, what was it like? What were the vibes? Give us a little journalistic takeaway of your experience last night in Cameron Indoor.
Yeah. Ross, it was funny. We texted like, I'm going to be in the Devil's Lair, like pun intended, I guess. Like, do I rock the Carolina blue loud and proud, or do I go a little more neutral and try to avoid some heckling? And I got some input on it, and I was like, man, I got to wear the Carolina blue. So I had my, my checkered shirt on, and my Carolina hat. And we had great tickets. We were directly behind the Duke band. So, it was a little loud, but we were right on the front row behind the basket, behind Duke's band. So really excellent tickets. Got there to campus about 5 o'clock, so about an hour and a half early. Walked around a little bit, took a picture in front of a really cool, like, Carolina branded team bus. And which was parked right there next to Cameron Indoor, and not a single heckle outside of Cameron before the game. Not one.
Yeah.
There were, I didn't expect for there to be many Carolina basketball fans there. It's a tiny arena. That thing is top to bottom, season ticket holders. Like at the Smith Center, for example, like if you want to get season tickets, they're not going to be good, but you can just go to the ticket office and get them. Or or if you want to find a ticket through the ticket office individually, or on the secondary market, like they're reasonable. That's obviously not the case at Duke, being less than half the size. And every time I walk in there, I'm just staggered at how small it is, truly. But like we get in, find the seats. Like people around us are nice. Like I wouldn't say we were chatting, but we weren't being pulled again. And the vibes were high. I mean, you could tell there was a sense of confidence around all of these Duke fans, saying, big game tonight. I think we got them, we'll see how the matchups play out, but I think we got them. That sort of type of conversation. It's, I thought that one of the biggest things for us would be to like eliminate or limit plays at the rim. And first play of the game, they get an easy drive right down the middle of the lane and a dunk. And of course, about blows the roof off of Cameron Indoor. And, pretty much downhill from there for the Tar Heels. But, in the second half, so I went with my future father-in-law, and he was kind of amazed at how intense the atmosphere was. And I'm like, man, this was almost a down night for Cameron Indoor just because it was such a blowout. Like in the second half, I mean, the fans, they didn't even almost have anything to get into. Like it was 20 points and then it got extended to 30 points and that was about it. Credit to them. Great atmosphere, great team. Carolina just didn't have an answer for anything.
Was this your first time as a fan? Because you've been in there
Yes.
once as a player or twice as a player?
So I played there when I was in high school, actually. Marshall Plumley and I were on the same high school team. I was a junior. He was a senior. He had already committed to Duke. Of course, his older brothers were already on Duke's team. And we played Oak Hill in
Nice.
Cameron Indoor. And we played on ESPN, actually. And so that was my first time in there, like ever, really, I think. And then, just once as a player for Carolina. It was that 2016 game at Cameron where whoever won the game was ACC regular season champions. And then shortly after, the famous, like, Roy Williams dancing into the locker room meme.
Oh, yeah, you're in that. You're in that,
yeah,
right?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So, but first time as a fan.
Okay, cool. All right, let's talk a little bit about the game. To kind of get that out of the way. I mean, complete beatdown. There's not much to talk about, but I think, like we said, like it was just a size and talent difference, and UNC couldn't get anything at the rim. No one really had a great game. I thought one thing I wanted to talk to y'all about is I thought Drake Powell should have started and played a lot more. He was the best player in the second half for UNC. He had, I think, 12 points. All of his 12 points came in 13 minutes in the second half. I thought he was the one guy whose length could, give Cooper flag and Knipple a little bit of issue. And it was surprised to see him not start. They had Seth Trimble on Cooper flag to start. It's just like I think UNC should have switch something up, like go with Trimble and Drake and like sit, maybe just not play RJ or Cadeau as much. They just weren't effective. They couldn't get the shots off, deep, couldn't get the shots off at the rim. Nothing, couldn't get anything going offensively. It was just the worst example of UNC's offense for the season in a capsule against Duke. And then Duke got what they want. They ran good action. They were dominant. They got in the lane. They had sharp little passes. They had double UNC's assists. Is there anything that stood out? Let's get like 1 or 2 points from y'all that kind of stood out from this game, and then we'll move on to bigger picture stuff. But my big thing is I thought Drake should start, and I'm surprised he didn't play as much. I just thought once he got cooking, he was good, and once UNC started playing loose, Drake Powell was the best player for the Tar Heels because the short guys couldn't do anything. Mike?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
go ahead, Mike.
At the end of the day, right? Like this is a where are our shooters, right? Like we have so many guards. We're running a small lineup to get more guards into the lineup and on the court at the same time, and none of them can hit a shot. I mean, how many times did we see them dribbling on outside the perimeter, just kind of without any sort of plan, passing back and forth just to see if something would open up without any rhyme or reason to it? You'd have a split second where Seth would get the ball, or RJ would get the ball, or Ian would get the ball, and no one would take a shot. They all seem
Hmm.
kind of scared to shoot. And I mean, you look in the first half, they went 3 for 11 from 3 point range. And from a guard centric lineup, that can't happen. The only way Carolina was going to win the game last night was if they shot and made a high number of threes, right? We know we can't compete with Duke on the glass. This is wild. Carolina out rebounded Duke 31-26, right? Had more offensive rebounds than Duke did, which you watch that first half, you're not thinking that. So knowing that, I think we've known all season that defensive intensity isn't there. We can't hit the shots when we need them to. But like I just felt that our guards completely let us down last night. We knew our bigs are going to be overmatched, but the guard performance last night was just abysmal. And like it's been kind of that's been a trend throughout chunks of the year when Carolina has struggled. RJ plus minus was -26 last night, right? We
God.
saw, yeah, was -26 last night. Elliot Cadeau had 3 turnovers in the first 5 minutes, right? We
Uh-huh.
were trying to get cute with the passing against some incredibly talented Duke players, and like it just blew up in our faces. And then our supposed shot makers were afraid to shoot the ball, and so I wish I could just point to one thing and be like, well, clearly that was the issue, and that's what the problem is. But there's so many issues with this roster, and like I think that's just it. We were down 32 points at Cameron Indoor last night. Like that just can't happen. And that doesn't come from not getting a good big. That doesn't come from, poor shooting night from our guards. That comes from a confluence of like 3 or 4 fatal flaws for this
Yeah.
Carolina team that just aren't going to get solved this season.
Yeah, I mean, I think RJ having such a bad year compared to last year is just a huge storyline for this season. I mean, we've talked about the size stuff and the lack of big men, but yeah, RJ just you need UNC needs him to score 25 a game, and he just hasn't been as good of a player offensively. And then you expected K Tyson to be like the second leading scorer, and is giving you 0 a night. K Tyson was plus 12. Did y'all see that? The big run, the 18-2 run.
Hmm.
K was in for like that whole run. He kept coming out of the timeouts in. I was like, what? I can't believe he's playing this much. So it's kind of a funny stat. Kind of shows you how bad of a stat plus minus is. Because okay,
Yeah.
Ty's the best player on the court, but he didn't do anything. Spenser, game wise, what are a couple things that stood out to you that you want to talk about?
Um, just how overmatched we were 1 to 5.
Hmm.
Being in the building, you saw when those starting lineups were announced and they were about to go to the tip. You're looking at our tiny little dudes, and like I don't really use this lightly. Like it looked like the JV team versus the varsity team. It looked like a bunch of kids who hadn't hit puberty versus a bunch of kids who had. I mean, that's pretty scathing, but like we were 5 inches shorter at like every position across the board. And so, you want to talk about like mismatches. Duke switched 1 through 5. So in theory, you've got an RJ Davis being guarded by a Cooper Flag, and RJ Davis being guarded by Malawach, Trimble by those same 2 guys or whatever. Like in theory, those could be mismatches, and they just weren't. Like we could not take advantage of them in the driving lanes. I mean, you saw it a bunch of times. RJ Davis got the ball at the top of the key with Malawach on him, and he couldn't get by him. Like he couldn't. That guy moved well. Anytime Cooper Flag was on him, like RJ's so small in comparison to those guys. Like you can't even get a shot on the perimeter. Same thing with Elliott. Same thing with Trimble. Like if you're 6 inches to a foot shorter almost than somebody, it doesn't matter if he can't move his feet. He's just too big for you to do
Yeah.
anything against. So, Carolina, not being able to take advantage of apparent mismatches, which you could even argue that they were kind of like mismatches in favor of Duke. you know, Carolina guard versus a Duke big man is actually last night with these two teams. Those were not mismatches for Carolina. They were mismatches in favor of Duke. We couldn't get any thing going from the perimeter because the driving lanes were so tight because of all of Duke's length. They're sagging off. And credit to Duke, they did an incredible job closing out on 3-point shooters. Like that length, they
Hmm.
had really, really solid positioning in the help side. They do just enough to get in that driving lane to deter guy driving, the kick comes, and they are there on the catch every single time. They also did an incredible job, and this probably hurt us just as much as anything, was we had, what, 4 fast break points? And
10. 10 to
10?
10.
Okay, well, I'd
Yeah.
say 6 of those fast break points probably came in the final 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Maybe 7 minutes, like when Carolina went on that big run late in the second, just a what's the term? A futility effort late in the second half. Like there was Cooper Flag was clearly tired. There was a Duke fan sitting behind me yelling at John Shire, like, get Flag out, get Flag out. I mean, he like turned the ball over 2 times in a row. He made a really weak pass that got deflected out of bounds or something like that. And he's just like walking up and down the court with 6 minutes to go and a 25-point lead. And like, even I was kind of like, man, why are these starters still in the game? Why do we still have 5 guys that, play 30 minutes or more for Duke still in the game?
Yeah.
So it was a lot of things. It was a really, really dominant
I
performance.
mean,
on
I
Duke's
hope
part.
that this game kind of will be like, all right, you can't recruit two starting guards who are 6 feet tall. Like, you can't do that.
Yeah.
You have to. One guard has to be 6'3" or above, and then preferably both starting guards are over 6'2", 6'5" range. And then you have to have size in the front court. Like, you have to do whatever it takes to secure a rim protector or an athletic big man. Like, it's just like I mean, I know Hubert tried in the transfer portal, but like you got to do whatever it takes to get an athletic big man and a 7-foot shot blocker, 6, a Amanda Baycott style defensive rim protector at the center position. It's really coaching malpractice when roster building. I mean, UNC was behind the 8 ball this whole season because of the roster. It's like nothing they can do about it. So hopefully this is a big wake up call. All right, quickly, let me mention Delta Spirits here. Delta Spirits, use promo code BHO10 at checkout, drinkdeltaspirits.com. Local Kernersville, Greensboro company. This is like a liquor replacement cocktail thing. It's THC, gets you pretty high and relaxes you if you're trying to move away from alcohol and stuff like that. All right, let's go broader picture here. UNC is 13-10 overall, 6-5. Probably outside the tournament. I would say definitely outside the tournament right now. Outside looking in. They have Pitt have a week off. Pitt at home. I'm going to go to that game in the Smith Center. Then Clemson on the road, Syracuse on the road. And then it gets pretty easy, like State, Virginia, Florida State. I think Florida State lost to Boston College yesterday. Miami, Virginia Tech, like all winnable games. Because I do think UNC is like above the middle of the ACC. What do y'all kind of see? Like, I mean, I don't think this team's gonna make the tournament, but they're gonna have to win the next 2 games are huge because those are against the best competition, Clemson and Pitt. And then you gotta beat the teams you're supposed to beat. Any thoughts kind of on the schedule and the season as it projects, and like NIT, like do you even accept the bid? It's just there's so many questions right now. Mike, what do you got?
Yeah, I mean, so I think you had to frame it in the sense of what would it take for Carolina to make the tournament at this point. I agree with you that they're outside the bubble, probably in that, like, not the first 4 out, but that next 4 out range right now. If you look at what's left on the schedule, yeah, like they're all winnable games, but that also hurts Carolina because it doesn't give them more opportunities for that kind of quad 1 win that we're so desperate to have. I mean, Pittsburgh and Clemson, you have to take care of business there. You lose either of those 2 games. Honestly, you lose any of these games outside the last Duke game, you're out for sure, in my opinion, unless you win the ACC tournament.
And Clemson's good. Clemson's a really good team. They've won 6 straight.
No, Clemson's good.
Yeah.
You have to win the next 8 games going into the last game of the year with Duke at home. After last night, I don't see any way they win, at Carolina. Like, it might be closer, but I just don't see a way that they pull that off. So you have to assume best case scenario for Carolina, they go 8-1 over the final stretch here. Then you probably need at least 2 more wins in the ACC tournament to even be in contention for a bid, in my opinion. Outside the miracle ACC tournament run or beating Duke, I just don't see this team making it. I think your best case scenario is probably, realistically, I think this team probably goes 5-3 over the home stretch here, and maybe wins a game in the ACC tournament, and then declines a bid to the NIT. I mean, that seems to be the most realistic outcome right now. I think
Yeah. Sorry. What I hate about this is like this is just UNC should be talking about Final Fours. Like this is just the
I
bubble stuff is just horrible. The standard is just the standard's not make the tournament. The standard's like, all right, is this team gonna go to the Sweet 16 or the Final Four or win a
three
title?
three out of the last 4 years we've been a bubble team, and like
Yeah.
this year it's not. I like this year. It kind of feels wrong to call us a bubble team. Like we're not really on the bubble right now. We're like talking about what we could do to get back on the bubble, which is even worse.
And having to win games in a tournament. That's dark. That's why NC State does. NC State's always like, all right, they got to win 3 in the tournament, maybe have a chance to get in. Spencer, what do you tell the team right now? Like, I mean, you've been in some locker rooms, higher level locker rooms than Mike and I have been in. What is Hubert Davis coaching staff like? Because you could see them, you could see some. I think you could see some quit coming in here. You know, it's February, it's the dog days of the season. You know, maybe some players have an eye on the transfer portal, eyes on the NBA. I'm sure Ian Jackson thinks about that. Like, what do you kind of tell a team like to play for? To like, what's the goal here? Is it one game at a time? Is it get better and practice every day? Like, let's give us some BS coaching stuff.
Yeah.
The dark
I'll say
silence.
this. I'll give a very diplomatic answer, I think. I'm glad I'm not in Hubert Davis's shoes. That's for sure. I if so I saw just a brief clip of Hubert Davis's comments after the game, and he went to something that he says a lot. He says, when you face a difficult situation, when you face adversity, when you face getting your tail whipped by Duke, it how you're judged, or it's all about how you react and how you respond. So there's no doubt he's preaching that same message to the players. Really the worst thing that could happen would be that we just have guys kind of mentally check out. I think even though we were going on a little bit of a run in the final stage of last night's game, I think some guys weren't fully into it. We made some kind of low effort plays and saw some bad body language at times. Boy, Ross, I go back to what Jay Williams talked about towards the end of that last game about there's not a leader out there pulling the guys into a brief huddle at a dead ball or at a free throw or something like that. I just didn't. They just don't. We don't have that leader. But again, back to big picture, like I think you have to preach to them like, guys, if there's ever a time for us to come together and finally do our jobs to the best of our abilities and to buy in more than you've ever bought in, it's now. Because it's like you can almost preach. I don't quite know if coaches would do this, because one thing that Carolina coaching staff never did under Will Williams and never did under hasn't done under Hubert Davis, to my knowledge, is like be vindictive. Say like, do you guys want to be viewed as the team that gave up? Do you want to be viewed by the fans, by the university, by the media, by everybody as the team that just like crumbled under pressure? Do you want to have that like badge of, I don't even know what to call it. Do you want to have that tied to your
it's like the 8 and
legacy
20
at Carolina?
team. You don't want to be the 8 and 20 team. That's like talked about a lot,
Yeah, exactly. I don't know if they quite say it in those terms, but they might say something like, well, how do you want to be remembered? Do you want to be remembered as the team that couldn't figure it out and then we lost at Duke and then went on another run of the century? Like kind of like 2022, but a little bit different. So I don't know. It's again, I'm glad I'm not in Hubert Davis's shoes.
I'm trying to think back to 22. Like, I don't know how I felt before that run, but this team just doesn't have that in them. They don't have the talent. And I'm not sure I don't know if I thought about back then, they had Caleb and RJ and Armando, and then Brady went off and they got rid of the one guy who's with Minnesota right now. Forget his name. But
Dawson Garcia.
Yeah.
Dawson Garcia, yeah. And then just started clicking. Anyway, all right, I'm going to read a Michael Hardison tweet from last night. And you already mentioned it. This game will be the end of This game will be the end of the Hubert Davis era. So I think based on everything inside, Carolina has reported, and they doubled down on it this week. I think Sherelle did. Make sure you check out Inside Carolina, subscribe to them because this is premium info, but I think this is pretty much out there. Hubert Davis is expected to come back next season. So we got to speak in those terms. People want him fired, but if that's not going to happen, we have to think about, all right, if he's coming back next year, what does this look like? Like, we can't be unrealistic. So I do think he's going to get another year. I don't know if that could change. Like, if they really bottom out here and maybe go 500 to close out or worse, I think you might have to make a change. But, if they stay on the bubble like this, I would assume he comes back and then they put everything towards making a roster next year that gives them a chance to succeed. There's talk about hiring a general manager. It seems like interviews are underway for that. That's a good sign. So I think he's getting the support he needs. He got Caleb Wilson coming in. Who knows what else happens. I hope Drake Powell comes back. There's more chatter about him coming back than I think there was a couple months ago, just because he's playing out of position and he needs to kind of develop offensively. But I think you can develop in the NBA too. So, all right. So long term, Mike, I don't think Hubert Davis is the guy, but if he's coming back, you got to kind of be like, all right, he is. What do you think? It's kind of a biggest question. Like, what do you think, Mike? Like, what do you think the future is? Thinking next 6 months, next year for this program. Like, what do you want, and what's your take on this?
Yeah, I think a couple things to address there, right? First and foremost, I know what IC's been reporting, right? And like they are the best when it comes to Carolina, bar none. So, I think that information is accurate, but that information is accurate to date, right? Hubert's coming back until he's not. In the UNC group chat last night, we were talking about, was this the equivalent of Mac's game against JMU, where it just became so untenable that yes, the intentions to come back, the intentions always come back until it's not. And so, last night, like before coming into the game, Hubert's coming back, hiring a general manager to see how that will work. But how untenable does this get? How much do they start spiraling? And if they spiral, like you mentioned, if they go 500, like, do you bring someone back like that? Because the highs in the Hubert Davis era have been very high. Final Four run, 1 seed to get to the Sweet 16. Like we're a Jalen Withers deciding to pass instead of take a shot away from potentially being in the Final Four and beating Alabama, or getting to Clemson, hopefully beating Clemson and getting to the Final Four. But like the lows have been very low. Again, I think the variance and the volatility that Hubert Davis's 4 seasons have shown us is not something that's just sustainable long term. So like, yes, we may opt to he may come back another year, right? But I feel like that's just kind of a dead man walking. We're going to do the exact same thing we've been doing, right? With regards to the general manager thing, from the reporting, from everything that we've been reading, they wanted, it sounded like there was pressure on Hubert Davis to hire a general manager before this, past season, that they wanted to have a GM in place to help with roster construction before this season. And he was very resistant to that. So when you are resistant to a GM, as a head coach, you are accepting the responsibility of roster construction on your lap. And I think we can all say across the board, he failed at roster construction this year, right? That is on him. And so if you're going to push back and say, no, we're going to handle this as a staff, you also have to be willing to accept the blame when everything falls apart, which it has. I also think he hasn't done himself any favors with kind of expectation setting. He's a very positive guy, and I think that that's good in some cases, but I think we can all point to different quotes from Hubert Davis and pressers that just seem beyond belief, and I think that takes away I think that can be seen almost as disingenuous, and to the point where like sometimes the people watching the games and the fans, the boosters don't really believe him when he's saying certain things. Talking about like Dontrez Styles being one of the best, that would be one of the best to ever wear a Carolina jersey when everything was said and done. I think we can all point to different quotes like that. And so between being resistant to hiring a GM, the volatility from season to season, the kind of expectation setting that it just seems absurd at times, I just don't think that this is sustainable. And it may be the end of this season, it may be the end of next season. I'm not sure he gets fired. From his body language and from the pressers after games and stuff like that, it seems like he is not having a good time. And he seems not checked out, but at a loss. And so I just have the question of like, whether it's this season or next season, do we really think that this is the long-term solution? And I don't think the answer is that it is.
So what you're getting at is it's better to fire someone a year early than a year late because the damage. If you know he's not the right person, you could do more damage by staying on, and it affects recruiting. Now basketball is different. You could flip a roster like that. It's not as in fact impactful as football, where you're bringing in 25 players a year. But yeah, I'm always it's better to fire a year early than a year late. Like I thought Mac Brown should have stepped down after the last season. You get the show rolling on the new era. Yeah, I mean, Mike, you've kind of been saying it about the chance that Hubert steps down. I've heard that a couple more times too. It's kind of an interesting perspective there, and like that he is just doesn't like the dealing with agents. I think Adam Smith said it. Like he's talking to agents more than he talks to players and parents and just the whole general manager stuff. But that's a great point. Like hire a general manager. I saw a name floated. Mike Schmitz, the assistant general manager at Portland, has been involved. He was at ESPN doing their draft stuff a couple of years ago. And I've heard something where the general manager would be in charge of the whole program, including the coaching staff, which is a wild thing, where he's in charge of the whole program, including like Hubert reports to the general manager, which is how NBA programs are run, right? The coaches report to the main guy. So I've heard that too, which would be kind of a crazy phenomenon. But can you imagine Roy Williams reporting to like a general manager? Like
different area.
Yeah.
Real quick, like one thing I don't want to get lost in this, because I feel like sometimes between football and basketball this season, I feel like I've been calling for people's jobs a lot. Like from everything I've read, Hubert Davis is a wonderful human being, right? Like I don't want to do this flippantly. Like I don't want to just say that we should fire the guy that is beloved by this fan base and like has done some incredible things for Carolina. Like it is a very difficult conversation to have. And like sometimes clearly in the Carolina fan base, that stuff gets lost in the ether because we're so results focused. Like from everything I've read, from everyone I've talked to, Hubert Davis is a really good man. And like, I don't want it to get to the situation where we are at like where the entire fan base is turned on him and it is a like awful breakup type situation. Just from a long-term perspective, I just don't see this as sustainable.
Yeah, but we don't want to get in a Matt Doherty situation where there really is upheaval within the Carolina family, within the fan base, within everything. I think the conversation about Hubert Davis coming back from like a athletic direction perspective. So Bubba Cunningham, like I think it's a very much a two-way conversation. Like Bubba's asking Hubert, like, do you want to come back? Do you want to have to deal with the general manager? Do you want to have to deal with all of the stuff that coaches have to deal with in the age of NIL and the transfer portal? Because if you're not 100% bought in, Hubert, then, you can leave. Like, and not in a bad way, not in a we don't want you way, but not in a this is not the best thing for our program type of way. So let's have a mutual departure here. So, I think, and so I appreciate what you said, Mike. I can personally attest to the quality of Hubert Davis's character. One of the greatest men, along with Roy Williams and many others that I've ever known. Done a great deal for me personally. I think, just my opinion, I think that Hubert would probably step down before there was a more aggressive move on the part of the athletic department for the reasons that I've just said. Like there's just mutual agreement that he believes within himself that maybe he's not the right guy to be doing the job because he's not 100% bought in. And I haven't talked to him enough, or if at all, really, to know if how he feels about that. It's
hang on.
Also,
that's a big ego thing. Like stepping down, like these coaches have egos, and that's a huge, like, you have to really look inside yourself and know that you're not the right person. That's a big ego check that I think is really hard for people to do. Like Mac Brown couldn't do it. So I think that's important. Like the psychology on that's crazy.
Story on that. Former walk-on Dewey Ferris, I think he graduated last year, organized a little gathering for guys who played JV and then walked on. That was earlier this year, back in December. And Roy Williams showed up. And Jack Wooten asked him, Coach, do you miss it? And he said, yeah, of course, I miss it. But I knew that I wasn't the right guy for this job. He told us all of that just in there. He said, I wasn't the right guy for this job, so I knew it was my time to go. So, it can be done. It can be done. I think Hubert has a lot of self-confidence, and, I think he loves basketball so much that, he would suffer through some things that he didn't want to do because he wanted to still be around and everything. So I don't know. It's a very complicated situation. And one thing to think about in the largest picture of Carolina basketball is like, well, who do you even replace him with? Like, is it Wes Miller? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. Like, do you go outside the family? But who are you going to replace him with then? So it's like, from the perspective of a coaching search, if they're like, do you start now? Like, do you start in 2 months when the season's over? Like, is 2 or 3 months, if that, enough time to fill the coaching position at the University of North Carolina?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, man. Probably not.
I don't.
Do you almost bring him back? And this is sort of sacrilegious for me to say. I admit this. I don't even like saying this, but it's like you sort of bring him back and convert and conduct a little bit of a covert coaching search next year with the intention of like, okay, well, if he has a great season, like, sure, what Hubert Davis, you get to keep coaching. Like, I don't know. I don't think that I know Bubba a little bit, and I don't think that he would do something kind of malicious like that. But
Yeah.
whew,
We're getting a little ahead of
it's a tough
ourselves,
one.
but it is interesting.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, I still think UNC is one of the best jobs in the country, if not the best job in the country. But I think it's harder and harder now with the SEC. Like, I don't think a premier SEC coach from a premier SEC program would leave their situation. I'm mainly thinking of like a Nate Oates or a Bruce Pearl. I don't think Bruce Pearl will even be a consideration. But like, why would you leave Alabama? You have everything you want there, unless you want to be the guy at Carolina where it's all basketball and you're not behind football. But I do think it is. And I think UNC is going to get the NIL thing figured out, and it's getting there. And the general manager move, that kind of stuff is promising for the future of the program. So I think it's becoming more and more of an attractive job in terms of NIL stuff. I think UNC is top three job in the country alongside Kentucky and Kansas, and then probably Duke right there as well.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, speaking of Wes Miller, he's lost 7 of the last 9 at Cincinnati. They are 12-8, 2-7 in the Big 12. They made the jump to the Big 12 a couple of years ago. So I don't think Wes
Wow.
Miller he hasn't proven he can win at that level. So I don't think Wes Miller would be. I don't think he'd be even in consideration. I don't think UNC fans would want that. I think some would want that, but I don't think you can hire a guy who's 2-7 in the Big 12.
Almost,
All right.
almost
Yeah.
grateful for that, just
You're not
because.
just going to magically get resources and become a better coach.
Yeah,
You know.
Yeah.
I'm almost grateful for that because, like, if Wes Miller was like first place in the Big 12 right now, like the noise would be off the charts. The volume would be way too loud,
Mm-hmm.
and like
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't help anything for either coach, for either situation. Like, I think unfortunately, and Spencer, you hit on it. Like, I wouldn't want to be in Hubert Davis's shoes. This is just a very difficult problem right now, and like there isn't an easy answer, and anyone that tells you that there is lying, right? Like,
Yeah.
this is a really, really tough problem. It's a really unfortunate problem, and it's going to be something where people that get paid a lot more than we do are going to have to sit down and figure it out because this is a challenge. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do y'all? We'll get out of here on this. Like, how do y'all feel watching games moving forward? Are y'all checked out a little bit? You still fired up for a weeknight 7 p.m., 9 p.m. tip off? Like, how do you feel as a fan for the remainder of the season? It's tough. Like, you kind of know what you're going to get. You get a close game. It's going to come down to the last 4 minutes, and you never know what's going to
Yeah.
happen.
I watch the games. I will never not watch the games. I will not be screaming into couch cushions and, having to go into the other room for 4-minute stretches for the rest of this season. You kind of know what you're going to get.
yeah, I mean, you don't get to cheer for this team when they're in the Final Four if you don't watch the games when they're going to miss the
Yes.
tournament, right? That's my
Yes.
baseline belief. You can be a fan of whatever team you want, but you got to stick with them through thick and thin. So I'll be watching the games. The emotional attachment isn't there right now, right? Like I went and watched the Duke game at a bar with my fiance and some other Carolina alums up in Charlottesville, and like, before the game, she gave me the classic, "Hey, we're not going to let a loss ruin our night. Like, don't get super invested." That she's had to have with me for many a time, and I was just like, "Hey, look, like, I know what's going to happen here. Like, trust me when I say this. Like, this is not like 2010 to 2022 type Duke game. Like, I'm very much like, hey, like I know it's coming and it's okay." So checked out, to say the least.
All right, good stuff, guys. Really, really good conversation. A lot of different perspectives there. Appreciate y'all's time. Thanks for listening, guys. Remember to rate, review, subscribe to Big Hitters Only on YouTube, Apple, Spotify. Check out drinkdeltaspirits.com. Promo code BHO10. I think as the season goes on, we'll need more and more of that kind of stuff. All right, any last words? We all good? I think we covered a lot of stuff there.
Yep.
All right, guys. We'll see you later.